Learning inversions as a new student can be intimidating, but to be honest with you, teaching inversions to new students can also be really intimidating. On top of that, unlike teaching back bends and teaching arm balances to beginners where more or less you can still do it in the middle of the room, your normal yoga class setup, maybe you have to grab a couple of props. But when you're teaching inversions to beginners, almost invariably, you have to get to the wall and probably do even more demonstrations. So let me walk you through my favorite inversions to teach to beginners and how I do it, starting with handstand. With handstand, there's really two variations that I like to teach students. Half handstand at the wall, and then handstand transitions, okay? And I'll break that down in a moment. So when we're doing handstand at the wall, when you're a newer student, it's kind of helpful to get a sense of the distance that you need to place your hands. And I don't want you to like get out a ruler or a protractor or your calculator to figure this out, okay? It's pretty forgiving, to be honest with you. But the easiest way to do it is just to have your students sit with their legs straight and their feet against the wall. And then take note of where the hips are, right? You just kind of take notice of where the hips are, turn around and put your hands right there, okay? So that's more or less gonna be the distance. And then the next thing that we wanna do, everybody, is we wanna help the students walk the feet up the wall and understand where their final destination is in this pose. So we get the hands, we're gonna press the floor away just like we would in downward facing dog. So understand the shoulder techniques that you're teaching your students in downward facing dog are gonna apply really well to handstand, okay? And when I'm teaching this half handstand, I'm not trying to get too detailed into too many different techniques. Really, I'm just trying to help them find the shape. So we get the hands, and then we're gonna I have people do like the tiniest down dog in the world with the heels on the wall, right? So this is like a ridiculously short down dog. But then what I do is I have them tuck their chin and take one foot to the wall at the height of the hip, right? So instead of just like popping up and starting to walk the feet up the wall, I like to go into this really short down dog, look where you're gonna put the foot, and then go foot in line with the hip. Then that foot pushes the wall. We get the second foot to the wall at the same height, and we press the wall away with our feet and our floor away with our hands. Then we come all the way down. What I like to do with this, everybody, you have to think about being a new student and being anytime you're new to something, you probably want to focus more on more repetitions for shorter durations than fewer repetitions for longer durations. This is hard. It's easy to get into, but it's hard to stay. It's a muscularly and mechanically kind of demanding position to be in. I'm gonna show you like another little detail or two, but what I would do, everybody, if you're gonna take the time to teach this and get everyone to the wall, don't have them up forever, or you're gonna kind of perpetuate a certain amount of aversion. Like if someone's uncomfortable there and they have to stay there for a long time, they're gonna dislike it even more. So have them do it 3 or 4 times in a row for 3 to 5 breaths, child's pose in between, okay? Now another thing, everybody, if someone is really struggling, take their hands further away from the wall. So if I just do more of like a normal length down dog, and I just kind of put my feet at the wall and I'm here, this is so much easier, okay? So now this is not as much of a right angle. I'm not getting the same vertical quality from the forearm through the elbow, through the shoulder, through the torso as I would ideally like. But if someone is really struggling to walk their feet up or they can't stay, have them come off vertical in their upper body by having a longer distance of the hands to the wall. It's gonna make it so much easier, okay? For the most part, you're just trying to get people up there. So teach the shape, tell them to push the floor away, breathe, come down, right? So just kind of trust repetition. Now, The second thing that I like to teach students when it comes to handstand is the swing and hop transitions, okay? I wanna make this really, really clear. When I am teaching beginners the swing and hop transition to handstand, I don't actually want them to get all the way to handstand, okay? I am always communicating, just like teaching arm balances to new students. You're starting the process. You're not ending the process today. We're starting the process today. There is a learning curve, and this takes time, commitment, consistency, and transition. So when we're learning the handstand transitions, we're not trying to go all the way up. We're trying to get good, skillful, coordinated action. This is what I like to do. I like to have my students take the fingertips close to the wall, but we're not coming all the way up. So theoretically, you could do this in the middle of the room, but being closer to the wall is still comforting and it gives a little more orientation. So we get the fingertips maybe 2 or 3 inches away from the wall. We do down dog, and then we step 1 foot forward. Then from here, everybody, all I want my students to do is swing with one leg, right? And that leg that swings towards the ceiling, we want to train it to stay straight. If the knee bends, it's going to break some of the momentum. And then the standing foot, which we're going to call the hopping foot, we just want it to push the floor away. Just do little baby hops. And then I'm gonna show you what you have to troubleshoot, okay? And you can even have students do this, and it's kind of a fun, funny thing to watch, but pause that for a moment. So watch. We're in down dog. We're telling our students, you're not trying to come up. You're learning the process that will eventually take you up. We step a foot forward. We have our swinging leg. It swings and stays straight. And then the jumping leg or the hopping leg just coordinates, it just pushes the floor and jumps up a little bit. Then we pause. We swing and hop. We swing and hop. We swing and hop. Now everybody, I can guarantee you, probably many of you watching, and many of your students are not going to find that satisfying, but it is a necessary step in a longer process of learning, okay? Now, the one main detail in that swing and hop transition I want people to get is what the jumping leg is doing, okay? And what's going to happen for a lot of students, and what you're going to have to troubleshoot, is this. A lot of students with this leg are going to do this. People are going to be like this. That's not hopping. That's doing this. And this, everybody, is never going to get anyone anywhere. So one of the things I like to have people do, and this is what I was saying is like kind of fun and funny and kind of breaks the ice a little bit, is I'll have people stand up and just like literally jump up and down. Like, and I'll be like, okay, I know this is kind of silly, but bear with me, okay? So bend the knees and just jump. Like, do that a few times, jump. Bend the knees, push the floor away. And everyone will do that. And I'll say, that's what I want you to do, not, watch, everyone jumped by bending the knees and pushing the floor away. No one jumped by doing this. Okay? So when you're working on that transition to handstand, this is the biggest key. Don't like flick the foot and lift it. Bend the knee and push the floor away. When you get people to understand that, everybody, immediately they stop doing this. And they start pushing, 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 okay? So again, you want to set it up like, hey, there are parallel tracks, parallel skills that we have to build simultaneously over time. And when they come together, handstand happens. The first is half handstand at the wall. We looked at 2 options. The second is that understanding of really how to make that basic swing and hop without flailing. In the companion podcast to this episode, where Andrea and I talk much more about the broader context of teaching inversions to beginners, and where we talk about the benefits and the challenges of teaching inversions to beginners, I talk you through why I don't really love to teach beginners headstand or shoulder stand. Even though those are the easier inversions to get into, they're the ones without sufficient skills and sufficient strengths are probably more dangerous for the body, okay? So I choose to teach my beginners handstand and forearm balance before I teach them headstand and shoulder stand. And again, we talk more about that logic on that other podcast. So if you want more conversation about that, I would love for you to listen to that. So what I like to do, everybody, I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to teach forearm balance. And in a way, the final way that we look at forearm balance is forearm balance hybrid with headstand, okay? And what I mean by this is you're simultaneously going to be teaching the skills of forearm balance and headstand without the head actually being in contact with the ground. So there are two versions of Dolphin that I really, really love to do for beginners, a long version and a short version. So I have my students come onto all fours, take the elbow shoulder width apart. Don't do this to measure it. That doesn't measure anything. Just look down. You'll know that the shoulders are elbow width apart because you can see them. Interlace the fingers, press the outer wrist down. I don't like Dolphin like this so much for our purpose today, for beginners. Interlacing those fingers and rooting the outer wrists connects the hands together and just is going to give you a stronger frame. So from here, then we pop up to the knees and we press our shoulders and our torso towards the legs. Now, when we do this, everybody, we can even relax the neck and for some, let the forehead really gently rest on the ground. So when we're doing this, we're essentially taking a down dog distance, right? So it's a very down dog orientation where the shoulders are going into full flexion and the chest is moving towards the legs. So again, I want the shoulders for beginners to be, the elbows to be shoulder width apart. For beginners, I like those fingers interlaced, outer forearms down. I have them pop up to the knees and draw the hips and legs back. As we do this, if it's accessible, I like to have the students really gently rest the forehead on the ground. With regards to cues, I'm telling them to press the forearms strongly down, lift the sitting bones up, and press the thighs back, okay? This is really nice because you're getting the opening that the shoulders require for forearm balance. It's a little bit more of a stretchy opening orientation for the shoulders, but also that very light touch of the forehead on the ground starts to, over time, build the orientation of headstand. The second version of Dolphin, we take a much shorter stride and we get our body more vertically stacked over the elbows. This is going to create a little bit more strength, and it's also going to create the orientation in the body of the verticality that's present in both forearm balance and in headstand. So to do this, it's just like the previous version, everybody. We start the same. The elbows start on the ground, shoulder width apart. We get the interlace. We ground the outer wrists. We come up onto the ball of the feet. But instead of being a longer, stretchier version of the pose, we relax the neck between the elbows, walk the feet forward, and get the shoulders more vertically oriented over the elbows. Now, for students that are a little tighter in their hamstrings, there's going to be this really critical threshold where if they walk any further forward, they're going to start to bring the shoulders too far forward and start to collapse, okay? So don't worry about how far they're stepping the feet in. We just want the feet closer to the elbows in this version than they were in the previous version. So again, we get the elbows down, we get the finger interlace, we press the forearms down, we broaden the shoulder blades, then lift the knees, relax the neck between the arms. You want the head to hang in this version. The head in this version is not gonna rest on the ground, okay? So the top of the skull is off the ground, but it's hanging towards it. And then we just walk the feet in towards the elbows. Now, the final thing that you can do from here is you can also have them raise a leg. This starts to help them understand how to do the swing and hop into the pose, but also by raising one leg at a time, you're pitching the body even more vertically up over the elbows. And this really helps to not only build strength, but it helps the student understand the strength requirements for forearm balance and headstand. So it helps give them a good gauge. The final version of forearm balance is really a hybrid pose between forearm balance and headstand. And it also builds on the swing and hop work that you may have been teaching in the preparations for handstand, okay? So this starts to put a lot of things together, everybody. And this is often the scenario where students start to get upside down for the first time, okay? Now, this is also the scenario in which you, as the teacher, are probably spotting some people here and there and facilitating that transition. Walking you through how to do that is beyond the scope of this conversation, but let's look at this really valuable hybrid pose. So what we're gonna do, everybody, let me just show it to you first, and then I'll talk you through it a little bit more. So we set up exactly like we were setting up our dolphins, but we're facing the wall and we're really close to it with our knuckles. Then from here, we're gonna pop up into dolphin. We're gonna bring our shoulders forward so the shoulders are over the elbows. We're gonna step a foot in. We can actually walk both feet in. Relax the neck, the head is not on the ground. And then remember our swing and hop work that we did earlier with handstand? Now we're just gonna add that to this pose and come to the wall. So my head is relaxed and it's off the ground. My arms are doing headstand / dolphin. So I have that interlace. And when you're doing versions where you're actually in headstand and the head is on the ground, you're gonna have a couple of different options of what you do with the hands and whether you cup the back of the skull or whether the heels of the hands are together. There's a handful of different options. It just kind of depends on proportions. But when we're working this, and I'm gonna show it again, we're gonna be wanting to close the heels of the hands, okay? We just want a really strong, firm, stable base, okay? So I'm gonna show that again. And again, what we're doing here is we're wanting our students to understand there's a process and there's a progression, especially when it comes to harder poses that involve the head and neck. So we're not just like whipping people into headstand or shoulder stand because they can. We're teaching a methodical process. So watch one more time. We're building on everything we've done up to this point. The heels of the hands are together, the outer wrists are rooted down, the knuckles are close to the floor. We start in long dolphin. Then we walk into short dolphin. Then we raise a leg into one-legged dolphin. And then just like we did earlier, everybody, from handstand, we bend the knee and we push the floor away. Those legs come up. We reach through the heels, we keep the neck relaxed, and then we come all the way down. I want to make the final point on this, everybody, is that, and I've said this about some of the other poses. Those of you that know me as a teacher, you know I prioritize technique. I prioritize refinement and skill. Understand, we're just getting the basics of the shape. If someone gets a good dolphin with the head off the ground, they get the right positioning, they get a little swing and hop and they get all the way up, done. That's amazing. We don't have to tell them 40 different things. We don't have to be like, suck in the ribs, tuck the tailbone, all these things. These are for down the road. So as a teacher, you have to understand your audience and you have to understand what an audience can understand at any given time, okay? Now, the final thing that I'm gonna show you is how I like to teach beginners an adaptation of shoulder stand. As we look at the most simple setup for shoulder stand, I want to acknowledge once again, as a teacher, I am very conservative when it comes to headstand and shoulder stand. I want my students to have strength, skill, and the ability to be oriented and well controlled upside down before the neck has any load whatsoever on it, okay? Not everyone makes that choice, but I'm just being very transparent with mine. So what I like to do is bridge pose meets shoulder stand. This is a really common thing, and it's a really nice, brief way to do shoulder stand for new students. So we need a block, and when I take the block under the sacrum, I like to take the block so that it is width-wise across the back of my pelvis instead of narrow-wise. So we don't start on the block. We start in bridge. We have a block nearby. We lift the hips into bridge. We get the block under the back of the pelvis. We pause. We make sure that the block is an appropriate height. We bend the elbows 90 degrees, point the fingertips towards the ceiling, so we start to get that feeling of how the arms are going to work in shoulder stand. We draw the shoulders underneath us without pulling the shoulder away from the neck and the ears. Then one knee at a time into the chest, reach the legs straight towards the ceiling, and work the legs. This is not a passive pose. So you're gonna be here 30 seconds. You're gonna be here for a minute. Remember, you're working with beginners. This is the beginning of a process, not the end of a process. Then when it's time to come down, we bring the feet to the floor, remove the block, come all the way down to the ground, and then however you're gonna work from there. I wanna just reiterate this one more time. You are not in control of your students' process or how your students, decide that they wanna learn their inversions. But you are in control of the methodology that you present. And I want to strongly encourage you in no way to be fear-mongering, right? Like, we're including these poses. I teach all these poses to raw beginners. However, we want to understand that what I've showed you today is a process. It's a process. It takes weeks, months just to become really skillful at these things, let alone the inversions that these things start to meld into. So as well as you can, role model for your students, not in any way being fear-based, but being patient and being persistent and being process-based, and keep giving your students something along the path of these poses to work on, and I think they'll really appreciate it.